Can you put some hashtags in there too?
You are live.
We are live. Discussion 10. Well, 11, I guess, for us. We are discussing the 10th episode of the BEMA Podcast, Walking the Blood Path. We cover Genesis 15 through 17 this week. Previously, we talked about Genesis chapter 1 through 11, and that was the preface of the story. And then we've gotten into Avram's genealogy and why he married Sarai, and now we're moving on to finally getting into some meat. Feels like no more backstory. Now we're just regular story, a sequel to the prequel. So, in the beginning of chapter 15, it says, "After this, the word of the Lord came to Avram in a vision. 'Don't be afraid, Avram. I am your shield, your very great reward.' But Avram said, 'Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eleazar of Damascus.'" So right off the bat, Avram has already given Lot up twice. And now he has no way to gain an heir in his mind. But God is trying to reassure him. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that I would do anything different from Abraham. Mm-hmm. I can't say that I would. After, living my life and doubting God plenty of times, I can't say that I would be any different. So in his eyes, Eleazar, his servant, is the only person he can pass his lineage on to. So it moves on to verse 3, and Avram said, "You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir." Then the word of the Lord came to him, "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is in your own flesh and blood will be your heir." So between these four opening verses in chapter 15, Avram calls out to God. It says after this, where the Lord came to Avram in a vision, and he said, "Don't be afraid, I am your shield, your very great reward." And then Avram says, "What can you give me since I remain childless?" And it doesn't say how much time passes between verse 2 and verse 3, but they're insinuating that some time has passed, because the first time it's a question, the second time it's a statement. "You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir." So now he's kind of getting salty. And I can't say that I would be any different. But then God says, "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is in your own flesh and blood will be your heir." So I said that already. So God responds to Avram's statement in verse 4. And it seems like he still has patience for him. Like I don't know how he said it back. For all I know, God could have got an attitude back with Avram, but I doubt it.
Rubbing the temple.
Yeah. It just reminds me of being a parent. When kids ask you something and then they tell you something and you're like, "All right, come on. I told you we were going to get ice cream, chill out." Yeah. But how can I have ice cream? I don't have it in my hand yet. So Avram is struggling with the promise of God. And then he says, "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is in your own flesh and blood will be your heir." Then he took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." Avram believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. So we lean on that a lot later in Hebrews, as Abraham being, Avram being credited as righteousness. But he doesn't want to give him all the information. And can't blame God. Avram doesn't really need all the information because he's going to screw it up. And I can't say I wouldn't have screwed it up, because I have screwed up plenty, knowing what I know. So sometimes we want answers and God knows that we don't need them for what I just said, because if we do know, then we're going to screw up the story. So without God's perspective, we cannot fully understand. And if we have more information, we might make the wrong decision. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about in time travel movies. Every time they go back to change something, it changes everything in the future. Mm-hmm. So God can see like all these possible outcomes, and He's like, I'll give you a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it gets into that, the whole theme is trusting the story.
Mm-hmm.
And our problem is we try to get ahead of God, and we start questioning. Well, you say that I'm supposed to have all these spiritual blessings, or I'm supposed to have all this, or I'm supposed to have all that, and then we try to figure out a way to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Abraham does over and over again. And we look at that and think, oh, how silly for him doing that. But that's exactly what we do. And I thought it was significant that God doesn't tell him everything. And it helps me realize I don't have to know everything either,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like I have to know everything.
Yeah.
And just looking back at times that I thought were some of the worst times, God said, that's nothing. I
No,
got you don't know what you're talking about. That we think that this is the direction, this is the plan, this is the way it's supposed to be, and then we start making it happen that way. I think I try to force things to happen that way rather than let things happen.
Right.
Let God be in control.
Wow.
I want to confirm, because I think my way, I have a pretty good idea how to do this, like Abraham did. He thought, okay, God says he's going to bless me. Come on, Lot, let's go, because God will use you. And now I don't have you, so I guess I'm going to have to go with the servant. And then when he didn't have the servant, he says, well, I'm just going to go with this other woman. He's constantly trying to get ahead of God on what the plan is. And I think that's a pretty big story even for us and for me to think, am I patient enough to let God figure it out? That I don't have to have it all figured out. Mm-hmm. Just like kids, or, we joke about, that little kids. You said we could go. Well, we're growing.
Are we there yet?
But you're driving me nuts. In the process. I'm sure God feels the same sometimes.
God's like, don't make me turn this car around. I'll take you right back to your dad's house.
Kind of makes you wonder why that took him to 100 years. Maybe he kept jinxing it or something like that. But it makes me think, the hardest part about waiting on God is waiting on God. And so, you think about promises and things. But I think, for me, the significance in the story is this is the first time we see Abraham being real. I think this is the first time, or at least I see him being emotional with God.
Mm-hmm.
Or having that, what I refer, yeah, it's what I refer to as having that, you have it out with God. And I think that's a big step towards someone's relationship with God. For me, 100 years ago, that's how my relationship with God started, with that prayer and just let it out. And sometimes most of my friends became friends after we had a big fist fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think this was how he really became connected with God, how we can become connected to God. Just let it out. God knows what's on your mind, what's on your heart. Mm-hmm. And if you just let it out, then you allow yourself to be real with God, and then God becomes more real with you. And I think in what his words were saying, okay, this is what I see. This is what I know. Give me something that I can lean on in spite of my own knowledge. Because obviously, you know more than I know. You know where you're going with this. I don't. I need something. So when he takes him out to look at the stars, I think that was God giving him this handle for him to hang on to, so that at every night he can look up and be reminded.
Those are my kids, grandkids.
Yeah. And so I grew up knowing that what they call a faith extender, just kind of seeing something. I've been in school forever, And so I need some sort of light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
So, when I was getting ready to graduate with a bachelor's, I went and bought my cap and gown a year before so that I can look at it. And so that it shows the significance of the relationship. One way we can begin to develop a trust with God. Because again, this whole story of Abraham, we know nothing of God until we see Abraham. And so learning by how he learned to trust is how we can learn to trust as well.
I think that him being real here, if it helps me see that God was in charge of writing the story, because if we were going to write about the man of faith,
It was perfect.
he'd have been a superhero.
Keep and
But-
Yeah, cake and
But I
bacon.
think these showing the vulnerabilities and the flaws in these characters help us that our story isn't over yet either, and we're not as hopeless as we think we are.
Yeah.
I do wonder sometimes if we can ever be as patient, not just Abraham, but all you think about. In Hebrews, it talks about how they all saw them from afar, like they
Yeah.
welcomed them, like they didn't. This is crazy because Abraham, even though he sees his son born, he doesn't see it. Everything that God does, right? But he trusts enough that it's enough. He trusts knowing that it's gonna become. And I'm like, we can't even until next week hardly wait for things,
But what if we were looking ahead? They were looking ahead for
Mhm.
Jesus, the Messiah coming.
Yeah.
What if we're looking ahead for the Messiah coming
Yeah.
back?
Yeah.
And to be dreaming of eternity,
Mm-hmm.
because we're so stuck in the here and now
Totally.
that it's hard to think there's more to this life than this life. You can know it intellectually or whatever, but still not have the faith.
Yeah.
Whatever I'm going through now, maybe because I've gotten older that I'm realizing I'm closer to death than I was last year.
Sure. Every day.
When little kids have a birthday, you ask them, so what can you do now that you couldn't do? Well, now, for me, it's the opposite.
Now that I
What
could-
can't you do this year that you could do last
Mark's
year?
like, get up from the floor easily.
Yeah. But maybe we need to, instead of feeling like, man, they had this amazing faith because they were looking at a distance, well, why not we have amazing faith and keep
Yeah.
looking at a distance?
Yeah.
And because we get weirded out because the election doesn't go like we think it should go, or if this doesn't go like we think it should, or that, and it's all here and now, and and we lose sight of the eternity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's probably the problem most of the time, right? Is we're just not seeing. And I wonder, what if God was like, listen, I can bless you right now. I can bless you, everything you want, all that you want. But in eternity, you're not going to be with me. Which do you prefer? And of course, we're like, well, I prefer eternity, but we don't act like that.
Yeah.
Right? We want it.
I don't know, we might struggle.
Yeah.
So, when I
Yeah.
am done, am I gonna be like,
Yeah. What's the, like, no, you'll be in hell.
oh, well, can I just be done? Can we just be gone?
Can I just get, can I get the
Non-existent.
good and go to heaven? That's what we want.
Yeah.
thing I thought about is, what was the servant's name? The chief servant?
Eliezer.
Eliezer was going, I wonder how he felt. He's like, God, I was this close to getting the lotto, and you messed it up.
Did he even know this was going on?
I know.
Yeah.
But, hey, you were that close. I was going to get everything. That was the lotto ticket.
Yeah.
And you threw it all away. You made
That's
him
true.
trust in his son.
That's not fair.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm sure he did.
I did all the work around here.
Yeah.
I think you did
I
know
don't
this,
think you did.
but I think he has
Yeah, I don't think
faith
this was a quiet prayer.
as well as trusting in the story.
I think this was a quiet
I just
situation.
think, that close.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I thought about with Eliezer.
Mhm.
And,
It's interesting. I need to think about Eliezer. How
Poor
do I
guy.
feel about it? I keep thinking about Willy Wonka because I got stuck on it because Abraham wants it, he wants it now. And I keep thinking about that little girl who sings that song, like, I want it now. But then I keep thinking about all the other kids who screw up also because they lose sight of the focus. They don't know what it is, the end of the journey, like Willy Wonka, but they all, fall off somewhere. And even Charlie falls off, but then he redeems himself. You know, it's like, I don't know, Charlie's like Abraham. In one of the stories.
That's pretty good.
There's always a redemption story there somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about that on the way here was, you know, it's talking about redemption constantly. And I was thinking, what does that really mean? And one of the important things that really kind of stuck out to me as I was kind of praying about it was God reinstituted value in me. That means he once had value in me, or humanity, and he reinstated it and says, you are valuable to me. And so, I mean, that's kind of what he was doing with Abraham. He's saying, you are valuable to me. There's going to be something great that's going to happen through you, and you are valuable to me. And to really think about if God was looking at me and told me directly, face to face, you are valuable to me. And I thought that was pretty intense to think about that, because we think about, you know, part of the Abraham story where or the creation story, you know, you start out good, everything was good, and then we didn't turn out so good. So now God is trying to return us to that good, and has reinstated value in us when we follow the story.
I want to know how, because it has Abram like talking to God about all this stuff, and then it says he believed him and he was credited to him as righteousness. But then it goes on to say, he also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of the Ur of the Chaldeans, in verse 7, to give you the land and take possession of it. And then it says in verse 8, but Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? So it's like why did he put that up there? He believed him and was credited to him as righteousness. When 2 verses down, he's still questioning. I'm not saying it's bad, he's questioning, it's just, why did they put it right there?
But we
Is there
try, I
significance?
think we try to make even being credited as righteousness something that we earned.
Mhm.
That somehow we earned that credit. And Abram was credited righteous. 2 verses later, he's still doubting,
Mhm.
but he's still righteous. And we need to accept that. I think we have a hard time accepting God forgiving us or loving us or liking us. You know, we know because we always talk about if we did one more thing, or, you know, just to pad the resume or something
Mhm.
to get some sort of justification for our redemption, or our being credited righteous, rather than just being thankful.
Yeah.
You know?
I didn't even think about it until you started talking about it as being like credit. Like it's a credit card of righteousness. You know what I mean? Like he's crediting him. Yeah, he's giving him righteousness before he has it, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Sure, I
In
get
my mind, it's kind of
You're
making sense.
pre-approved, things
Yeah,
done all the time.
Yeah.
You just gotta pay the bill. You gotta pay back.
What?
Pay back the righteous. I make you righteous, and you gotta pay back.
So then after he still asked him, how will I gain possession of it? Then they go on to the title of this study is the blood path. So verse 9, so the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abram brought all these things to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. So God told him to get these things, and Abram already cuts them up. So he obviously knows what he's doing and why he's doing it. But then it says the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram had to shoot them away. So reading that, and you never pay attention to it, but they pointed out, it's like, how long is he been sitting there
Long enough.
with these animals bleeding out? Yeah.
You just gotta go in the air before ravens or vultures start coming and circling.
It's another situation.
You'll be there for a little bit.
Waiting on God.
Like a week.
So if he did it in the morning,
Yeah.
then it's in the evening when he falls to asleep. So he's, I don't know how hard work it is to cut a heifer in half. Or
It'd be a pretty good
Pretty good workout.
effort, I would think.
Yeah.
to cut the carcasses in half and then setting them in that vision, did you see the PDF file? The
Yeah.
vision of it? That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've heard of it, I knew the story, but I didn't, to have that visual of the blood coming out of the trough is pretty,
Yeah, I didn't know anything about that. All I know is, because this is a really cool story, because known as the Fire by Night story. And you knew you had the two sacrifices, and then you had to work to protect it, you know, protect your sacrifice. And so I never knew about that blood trough, which is kind of a neat concept.
I was just thinking, imagine if things were still like this and you just walk outside and your neighbor is like doing that, like with his landlord or something.
Yeah, he's got a cat and a dog.
He's like, you know, instead of signing a lease, you know, I'm gonna walk the blood path, you're gonna pay your rent, you know, I'm gonna do this in your blood. And I was thinking about how we're so quick to say, I put that on my life, you know, or I swear by this, but if we actually had to do something like this, I think it'd be a whole lot more when we say, I put that on my life, or I swear by this, or whatever. What were you gonna say, Ray?
Well, I was thinking about just the sacrifice he's making. The animals that he sacrificed were quite valuable. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't cheap. It just let it rot. It's not like he was burning it and then, you know, eating it as a sacrifice like they did at the temple. He was out a lot of money. And that's a lot of money at that time to just dispose of animals and just, okay, I'm giving up a portion of my wealth
Yeah.
just to throw it away or throw it to you and offer it to him. That's
But, I mean, they were,
Although- I was gonna say, although I think the fact that he cut it in half without God telling him to cut it in half,
Sure.
he already knew this covenant, this is what we do for this
Yes.
covenant, and I'm gonna get something out of this covenant.
That's what I was thinking.
And so it really wasn't a waste in his mind because he knows he's getting something out of it. You know what I mean? So it's like the suzerain vassal treaty or covenants or treaty, I think it is called. But that's that way of making a commitment to another person.
Yeah.
Usually it's the suzerain and the vassal that make this commitment.
Yeah.
And I think the example in the whatever, the thing that today, session 10 or whatever it was, talked about like a father of the bride and the groom to be, right?
that'd be something to do. You wanna be my daughter?
Go get your down.
Come watch the blood path.
Yeah, that's what they
And if
did.
you don't take care of her, I'm
That'd be
gonna
really
you.
Must
interesting.
take care of you.
Yeah, look, listen, see these animals?
This is what we believe.
But you gotta think about too what the expectation was
Right.
out of that marriage that was happening, or if you had a marriage, the expectation of even the Caesar vassal was to produce children and to have heirs. And I think that was kind of Abraham's point. It was like, I'm gonna marry you, God, because I'm gonna trust that you're gonna give me an heir, even though I'm marrying Sarah. But I'm going to have the same commitment to you as a marriage, and you've promised me children.
Right.
I do think it's really interesting that this is in response to his question.
Yeah.
That's what I think too.
Yeah, it's in response to his question, how will I know that I'll take possession?
He's making it real for him.
And I just wonder if God, because I mean, like you're talking about kids, I think the same way. I think about my kids, and I just wonder if God's like, go get these animals, bring them back. I don't think God, because it didn't seem like this is an important thing, so I don't think it was flippant like that.
Right.
But that's how I would have felt. I would have been like, do I need to show you? Go get the thing, you know. But I just think that's interesting that this is the response to that question. And I wonder, like, he said, how will I know? So basically, did he know when he said, how will I know that this is going to happen? When God says, go get those, he's like, oh, we're going to make a covenant.
He's like, oh yeah.
He's like, okay.
You know, Simon would not have.
Yeah, but that would scare me to death, though, because I'd be like, what does this mean for me? On my side.
Yeah,
Because I can't kill God.
right, well, I think that's what he gets on, though,
Yeah.
and the part, I guess, you're
Yeah.
right,
Well, I think because it says the birds of prey came down and carcasses, but Abraham drove them away, it's saying that he hasn't walked through yet.
Yeah.
And he said in the podcast, he said he's stuck. Like he's like, if I walk through this, yeah, I'm toast. Like there's nothing I have nothing to offer. I don't have, you know,
You can't complete the covenant.
yeah. So I
But
can't
that's
imagine
when you
how
go
tough
on
that'd be.
the next thing though is that God walks through it for him.
Yeah, in verse 12, as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick, dreadful darkness came over him. And the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there, but I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go on to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt, the great river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Gerishites, and Jebusites. So like we're talking about the smoking, what did it say?
Pot.
I didn't want to say smoking pot.
The smoking pot?
God was smoking pot that night.
Smoking the fire pot. That's what-
Fire pot.
You know, they were talking about smoke and fire symbolizing God.
Yeah.
And this is the first time we see something like that with in the Bible.
Yeah.
Is this. But what was interesting to me is like when I was talking about the thick, dreadful darkness came over him. Because I always think about that being like the most, not the most terrifying thing, it's just the most ominous thing that can happen. It's just like darkness so much that you can feel it like wrapping around you. But then he says, you know, he tells him about the future. So it's like, does he just tell him this, or does he show him it somehow? We don't know. You know, because so many times from now on, people are shown things. You know, God doesn't tell them this is going to happen. He shows them this is going to happen. So I'm a visual person, so I was thinking about that way.
I think it's a pretty stunning visual of that God walks the blood path. You know, and he walked it for Abram.
Well, he kind of floats with that.
It's like,
But the blood's flashing on him.
Yeah.
You see footprints through it?
And he's putting it out there because he knows you can't walk the blood path because you'll mess up. But I'll walk it for you. I'll walk both sides of the covenant. I'll do both sides for you. And that, I got thinking, that is so true. Because I have made vows to God that I didn't keep.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was very sincere and serious, and I'll never do this again, I promise, I swear.
48 hours later.
10 minutes later.
And it's just amazing that God goes, I know that you can't do this, so I'll do it for you. And that hit me because I ended up writing down that creation was 100% God. The flood was 100% God. And the covenant is 100% God. So it means the cross is 100% God. That there's not anything that gives us any right to demand or to expect or to think that somehow we can't even pay the tip.
Yeah.
You know, we've been taken out to a really fancy dinner and we can't even pay the tip.
Or wash the dishes.
So that, to me, that probably hit me the most of how God is showing us, I already know you're a screw up. I already know you're gonna mess it up. And you've already messed up. But I'm gonna take care of this for you. And I already know that in the future, you're gonna mess up again. But I'm okay with it.
I was just thinking while you were saying that, because it doesn't necessarily say, like he doesn't say to Abram that you're going to mess it up. And I was thinking about, if I was in God's place, and I was doing this for Abram, and I walked the blood path myself, it would be because I don't want you to have to walk this blood path. Like, I think the whole point of Jesus is that, God, I don't want you to have to experience what I'm about to do to myself, you know. But when you were talking about walking the blood path, I was thinking back to the flood with the rainbow. And it's like next time it's gonna be me, you know, because the bow is pointing up at him. So, I mean, they go on to have more connection to the flood story besides just God doing it to himself next time.
I think the fact that God walked through that flood path really gave Abraham this sense of security and trust and faith to know that God was going to honor that promise that he made to him about making his descendants as numerous as the stars, because basically he's saying as he walks this flood path that may whatever happened to these animals happen to me should I not fulfill this covenant. And Abraham's watching this happen, and he's like, wow, there's no way God's gonna go back on the promise he just made me,
Yeah.
you know, because
Yeah,
this is what
so,
he's
yeah.
saying.
Well, and the other thing I think about, even just what you said, was that pact or that covenant that he made is that if you don't fulfill your end of the bargain, I'm gonna lay down my life. God's gonna lay down his life to fulfill that covenant, regardless. You know he's not gonna back down on his part. But if you fail on your part, I'm gonna lay down my life for you. And what and we look back and go, he did. No, he came in the form of Jesus and laid down his life to fulfill that covenant, to bring us into union with him.
You know, a little bit where I struggle with some of this stuff is, it's figuring out the balance of it all. Because, for instance, God is saying, I'm gonna walk through this and I'm gonna take the punishment. Essentially saying, first of all, I was thinking when he walked through the blood with it was the smoking fire pot and flaming torch. I was thinking, I wonder if that's like, you just can't see God, but he's carrying those, and so he's walking through them. I was like, that'd be super cool, right? I don't know if that's, we've seen too many movies, I think that's, we just think it's like
It's
a
floating stuff.
yeah. But I struggle a little bit with it because, not struggle, but I just, it's hard to grasp all. Because later he's talking about the mark of the covenant, and we know later there's more to this covenant. And there's parts where God's real serious about the covenant. There's punishments for not keeping the covenant. So I struggle with it because I think it's easy to go, well, if I don't do what God says, he's going to take the punishment. But there is punishment. There is issues to face. And I'm like, how does that, what? I can't wrap my head around it all. You know, I'm like, it's tough because I think coming from, especially when you've been around for a while, definitely, I think I tend to come from a spot more of, I'm supposed to do all this stuff because I'm following God, and if I don't, he's gonna cut me off, right? I don't think that, but that's the way I feel at times. And I think maybe the point is knowing I am called to things, but God makes up for my lack because of you talk about this covenant with Jesus, you know, he makes up for what I lack in those things, but there's still a call. And so I'm just like, I don't get the how it all goes together.
Right.
You know?
He goes on in, because we probably gets into the circumcision, but there's now, God's gonna expect more out of his people as he goes. So there's a greater degree of expectation. And just because God pays for all, that doesn't mean you are supposed to be an ungrateful jerk. You know, that there's still a response to God to have. I think we struggle more on trying to earn it than we do trying to accept it.
Yes, absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
That even we take, okay, this is what God says you have to do. I mean, like, all right, I'm gonna do it. We don't do it.
Right.
I mean, we can take all the rules, and if we sit down and really looked at it, we broke them. We messed up on all of them. And if you, Paul says, if you break one thing in the law, you're guilty of the whole law. So the end result is, even though I am responsible and I need to do all these things, like love my wife, can I mess that up already? I wanted to,
Yeah.
I intended to, but there are days I don't do it at all. Or loving other people. Jesus said, "Here's is my command: love one another."
Right.
Well, sometimes I don't even like you. I mean, you know,
Sure.
you know, we have those. I meant that in general.
Well, tell us how you really feel.
You looked at me when you said that.
Well, it just reminded me like talking about the expectation, the responsibility becomes greater and greater. And so I think about like, if I were like Aaron's age, being 11, I've been given so much responsibility in the household. But the older you get, you're giving more and more. But dad pays the bills, he feeds you, he takes care of you. But there's this expectation of growing and maturing in that responsibility and relationship.
Sometimes you didn't care after French.
But there are consequences when I don't, like if I was 17 years old and I came home drunk, and my dad, what is he gonna do? He's gonna go ballistic, but he still pays the bill, he still feeds me, he may beat my butt. But he's still fulfilling his part of the relationship, but I'm not. And so it's to return me back or repent, to turn back to where I'm supposed to be, what is good. And I think that it's a maturing relationship, and I think, Abraham was getting there. He was maturing in his relationship with God, but that covenant came through him, but that expectation was for all the nations that came out of him, that same covenant, that relationship, that maturity was to continue to grow through them. And
Yeah, it's definitely a perspective of the depth of God's love to, in a way, give us permission to make mistakes. Because we're going to. And when we make mistakes, the idea is that we would learn from them and that would cause us to turn to Him. And so, as we see further in the story, where Abraham realized he made a mistake. So what does he do? He turned to God. That's why King David was a man after his own heart, when he realized he made a mistake and he turned to God. Sometimes we have a tendency to turn from God because we're ashamed. And God doesn't pull out our shame in front of us. He allows us permission to gives us permission to make a mistake. And so love really allows you to mess up because you want to.
Sure.
Word to Jimmy?
no.
I don't want to exclude you, but I don't put you on the spot either.
When I mess up, sometimes I do the same thing. I seek out Egypt. I'm like panicking or I let my emotions control me. Well, the first thing I do is seek out the ideas of Egypt. Wealth and security from other places than God. I think that's where Abraham during the famine he ran to, was because he could see that there was something greener on the other side. But also God could have led him through all of this so that, he could figure it out too, but sometimes that can be a lot like Abraham in that aspect. Things get hard, you run to Egypt.
And part of it's learning from his mistakes. We can learn from his mistakes.
Yeah.
It says a wise man learns from his mistakes. A wiser man learns from the mistakes of others.
Sure.
So as soon as God tells him that this is going to come from your own line, what's Abram's solution? Hagar. He still doesn't think,
Trying to make it happen.
still struggling with the story. And I like how they say, God can take his people out of Egypt, but he can't. It's harder to take Egypt out of the people.
That's why it says they wanted 40 years in the wilderness. It's only a 3-day journey.
Yeah, 40 years for 3 days. So in chapter 16, it goes through the whole pregnancy of Hagar, the whole drama between Hagar and Sarai and her leaving. And then it gets down and Abraham is like, why can't it just be Ishmael? He's had this son, he loves him. Why can't it just be him? And God's like, no, that's not what I said. And, he's still, it's so tough to get about it now. It's like he still had to send him away. And he loved his son. He still had to send him away. And then the second time he has a son, God's like, now kill him. And it's like, I was just thinking about that, it's almost like sending Lot away twice.
Yeah.
He gives up Lot twice. Gives up Ishmael, he's going to give up his son, and it's like, you know. But then, right after that, I had never put this together before, but right after the whole thing with Hagar, now comes circumcision. And it's like, yeah, is there a direct connection? Because he literally did something to advance his line, and it was the thing that he used to do that, you know, that he then cuts. But it's a sign of covenant, just like the rainbow. You're never gonna forget that.
Right.
But he's 99 years old.
He didn't even have any trouble with antibiotic.
Yeah, he's 99 years old. In the beginning of this, I couldn't help but wonder how old Abraham is and how much that's weighing on him. Like you were saying, I'm close to death. Like, you know, we gotta go. Like, I'm not getting any younger. And, you know, when you're in your 20s, you're like, whatever. But as soon as you get into your 30s, you're like, oh God, the clock's ticking. Like, I gotta have some children now.
Before the blue pill, too.
And here he is in his 70s, 80s, and 90s. You know, Ishmael comes along. He's like, can I just have this? Like,
Isn't this good enough?
yeah, isn't this him? Like, this can't just be the one.
I thought it was significant that they mentioned that Hagar is from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes what you thought was the solution comes back to haunt you later. So he thought the solution was to go to Egypt because of the famine, but he brings a problem with him when he leaves
Yeah.
that comes back to haunt him later. And
Still,
go ahead, that's all.
and then it's still him looking to Egypt to be his source.
Yeah,
It's still leaning to his own understanding, because how many times have we looked at something, okay, this must be how God's gonna do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I know when I talk to God about things, he's like, that's none of your business how it's gonna come about. You know, and so it's still the idea of leaning to what we know.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're wanting this promise God gave us so badly, we're trying to make it happen. You know, and so it's that hardest part of waiting on God is waiting on God.
Well, I think Abraham was kind of a stud too, because if he's 75 years old, he marries this pretty hot girl, because she's the prettiest looking thing, because when they go into Egypt, that's what Pharaoh wants, but she's probably half of his age at least. 'Cause she was.
Well, it
probably-
says down here
He was
that she was 90,
199.
right? Yeah. So maybe 10 years.
10 years difference? Well, that's the,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm thinking that was bigger.
But still, she's beautiful enough to kill over.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, and for him to do it twice, and, you know, and then, so now both of them own, she's always been barren, she can't have kids. And now he's much older, now he's had Hagar. And, you know, it kinda gives credit to why Sarah was like, kinda laughing at the whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well,
like,
he laughs too.
this has never worked before, and now we're really, really, really old.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to raise children that I can't have. So how's this gonna happen? And so, but for Abraham even, you know, it's kind of the idea of like my grandparents, you know, when they were in their 70s and 80s, and think about them to have a child would be weird. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
well, they lived a lot longer than at one time.
but I think I'm, you know, almost 50 years old, and to have Ava, how much energy that takes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Never mind.
Yeah, but you know, I'm almost
That's a
50 and
little boy.
she's 9.
200 is the new 40.
And then you think about, okay, so even on top of that, I think about, okay, so even though I've got younger children, how much life can I offer them? You know, how long am I actually gonna live that they're gonna be able to enjoy to be with me? That's kind of scary to
Mhm.
think about. It's like, Abraham's here probably 100, he's thinking, if I have a child now, will I make it through the kindergarten graduation?
Yeah.
You know, type thing, you know, I'm like,
Start working out.
it's that is a concern for me. Yeah, it's like I think about that. You know, like you're in a rush to let's make this happen. I need an heir if this is going to happen. And you know, and the thing is, I give Abraham kudos because he never gave up on that. You know, for me, I think I would be like, okay, God, but I think it's a little too late for that, and we'll just move on.
Yeah, and I think it goes a lot to just what we can tend to kind of struggle with is the fact that God can. Because and I do it all the time. I do it, and I was even thinking about it. There was something we read earlier, talked about earlier, that's how Abraham had his own plan, thought this will work if I do it this way. God wants to do it, but I'm gonna make it this way. I think about like the church, like, we want the church to grow, we want to see people get saved and all this stuff, but I'm like, oh, we plan this, plan that. I'm like, hold on. God might be like, no, I want you guys to do this. You do whatever, something crazy, right? It'll work, but I tend to think, oh, I'll help God, or I'll figure out what the plan that God has is, instead of just going out.
Well, it's a big business to grow churches.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I keep getting an email, how to grow your church from 200 to 2,000. And I'm like, how about 200? 200? No, but it strikes me though too, how much time goes between stuff. Because he was 86 when Ishmael was born, and then when he was 99, the Lord appears to him again and talks about the circumcision and all that. 13 years, doing 13 years, I've been like, come on, dude, are you serious? Like I thought we're going, doing this thing. But that's a long time to wait. And then God comes back in and talks about all this stuff. Says Abram fell face down to the ground, and God made the covenant again with him. It's crazy. It's so long, but I guess it's our patience too versus God's plan.
And then I was also thinking, while you were saying that so long, the older you get, it just seems like it goes by so fast.
That's true.
Like, I was pulling up the parking lot this tonight, and I was just like, man, it feels like we just did one, and now we're back again. This week just went by so fast. Like, before I know it, I'm having to make notes for the next episode. I'm just like, man, where did the week go?
Yeah, this makes me remind me of a saying called the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. Sometimes I think the reason why it took so long, one, God waited for it to be the most impossible. To show that he can make it possible. But also I think maybe Abraham and Sarah weren't developed spiritually or emotionally to handle this. We don't let a 5-year-old drive a car because they're not ready for it.
It's not normal.
Not normal. Maybe on the country, maybe on the farm, maybe on the farm.
Ava hasn't stole a car yet.
Five's a little now.
Well, not all of us.
She's tried.
But the idea is that there has to be a certain maturity level before certain things are given.
Right.
So I think perhaps maybe there were certain things weren't developed in Abraham and Sarah that they weren't ready for.
That's a good point. We might be thinking, wow, that was a long time ago. God said, I know.
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to
We
be.
did this 30 years ago.
No, but it's not like what you said about or y'all talking about the 3 days turning to 40 years. It's like, if y'all would just trust me.
We could have done this in 3 days.
Your son could have been 20 by now. If you just trust me.
You could have had grandchildren.
And I just wonder, because I think how I do things, and I just put that on God sometimes. Sometimes I go, oh, you can do it. You got it then. Go ahead. Just come whenever you're ready. Come talk to me. And then God just lets us do it. And he's like, see?
And every time Abram comes back to him asking about it again, he's like, I don't know. Are you ready? Come on, man.
Because we blame God for it taking 13 years when
Yeah.
it wasn't God's fault.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
That's
The whole Ishmael thing was the thing that, now we gotta wait.
Yeah.
Now we gotta wait. I was gonna do it tomorrow,
Yeah.
but now we gotta wait 13 years.
Well, I thought about what you said, making, 200 into 2,000. It's kind of like the way they did the fish and the bread and the loaves.
So we start breaking people.
Well, no, but I'm thinking, in a way you have. All of you have, because look at all the leaders that have come from this church and gone out, and all the churches that they lead, and all the hundreds of people that they are affecting. You have. It's just somewhere else at the moment.
We don't get to see it.
You don't get to see it, but you have.
I don't know, but Pedro, if you're listening.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, it's like,
Pedro back. Martin.
Pedro, other brothers and sisters that have gone out that are in leadership now, and just, this church has grown thousands
In other places.
in other places. You just don't see it. You prepared them, and then they like Abraham, had to travel on, and he went to different places and constantly moving. And so, if anything, even though we may feel like a small group, there are a lot of change thousands of lives. We just don't see it just yet.
Mhm.
You know, but I just think about all the leadership that has gone out from this place. I mean, the other couple that just, they got a job, you know, I can't remember his name and his wife's name.
Pedro and Carrie?
No, the other couple. This is like, yeah. I think so.
No, the ones that moved to Santa Fe, right?
Santa Fe.
No.
Mhm.
Started the church.
Oh, you're talking about, yeah.
So I'm thinking, they were a party here and they were getting prepared and ready to mature, and then they were sent out. I think that's like kind of like Sarah and Abraham, it's like you were talking about, they were being prepared to mature, then it's time. You know, and if we never have thousands in this church, I think we should just be content and take care of to be the kingdom here, regardless of what our number is. And that shouldn't be that important. It should be that we should be focused on, we should be what God wants us to be, the kingdom here, a light, the salt of the world that way, and not think so much in numbers, because he is producing the numbers. It is coming from here.
Yeah, I do think that's a little bit of a struggle too, because there should be numbers, you know what I mean, but it's just not the most, it's not like that, you know, that's not everything, you know what I mean, but
Right.
there should be, but I see it and I see, but there should be, you know, some, and so, I mean, I think that's,
We still need to baptize a few people.
right, we still need
Right,
to,
right.
we still need to live out what God's
Yeah.
calling us to, and then, honestly,
be
but then the
action.
struggle becomes, Acts says, the Lord added to the number of days,
That's what I was
was
trying to
say,
say.
and I'm thinking, I added to the number,
No, you can't go from 200 to 2,000.
Yeah,
The
and
Lord adds.
God's like, I'll give you what you can,
Yeah.
you know,
Or you're not ready.
You're not ready.
I'm ready for it.
I could have done it last year.
But
Now
then-
wait 13 years.
But then my struggle starts going, why aren't I ready? Why aren't I ready? What do we need to get ready? Then I start working on getting ready. And God's like, would you just,
But
how about you
it
just
goes
pray?
back
How about you
to-
just pray?
I think it
Just
goes
get
back
ready.
to what Stephen was saying about how we have to grow some, you know, there's something in our character that needs to change, and I think of Romans 5 about how, you know, when we suffer, it produces perseverance, and then perseverance, character, and then character, hope, and I think that's kind of the nature of
Mature
getting to
enough.
hope, you gotta grow in all
Yeah,
those
but we
other
don't like
areas
that. We
first.
want it
Oh, no,
now.
yeah.
I want patience and I want it right now.
Lord, be careful.
You have to get a whole lot of patience dumped all over you.
Well, 2020 has been a practice for everybody, I'm
Oh,
assuming.
yes. Getting us ready for something.
And I thought about it on the way over here, I was thinking about that, I was like, do I have a passion to want to study the Bible with people?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I was praying that God would change my heart about, because honestly, yeah, I'm excited about the idea of studying the Bible with someone, but then again, am I letting fear and anxiety or anything like that block that? Because if that was my passion, that's what I would be putting all my effort into to make that happen. Or it was just, or am I looking at something that, oh, that would be nice, and that would be, you know, I would be excited if that happened. But then to think about, well, then it would kind of inconvenience me. You know, then I would have to give up time, then I would have to sacrifice this, or, but I was praying, God, let that be my passion, let me have the desire to really want to do that, and to seek that out, and not let all this stupidity or these stupid ideas that I'm having, because that's not true. This is what I want. And really think about, I would really like to sit down and study the Bible with someone. I haven't done that in a long time. And not just preach at them, not just talk to them, but really sit down and study
Yeah.
with them.
Take them with
To
you.
really have a desire to want someone that's hungry to listen, to learn about the scriptures,
Mhm.
and have that opportunity to have that honor of being able to sit down and share that.
Yeah, I do think, I believe there's a lot of people that are looking for God, really, that they really are. And I think too, that with that, for me, what I've been praying about, and when I think about it, it's not the goal of, I mean, it is staying by with people, because it's the how we do what we're trying to do. But when it comes down to it, like really, you know, just having this heart where, man, I just love God, I just want to walk with God and whatever, I just want to take you with me, come on, let's go, right, we're gonna go. And to me, it takes pressure off, because then I don't have to know exactly every single study, every single thing, every single whatever. I just take you and show you what I'm doing. Let's just, I want you to go with me because it's like you do with your,
Yeah,
you just show people, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we gotta get to, where it's not about necessarily, the how, but it's like, just go with me, come on, let's just go together, And that's just so much more fun.
Yeah.
I think one of the important lessons of Abraham, they talked about it in the podcast, was why did God choose Abraham?
Mm-hmm.
And how we have to be available
Yeah.
for God to use,
Mm-hmm.
and willing for God to use,
Like
surrendered for God to use.
Yeah.
Because, as cool as he is, he wasn't that cool. I mean, we see his flaws, we see where he messed up, all that. And sometimes we think that he stood out so much more, but he was available. And I think we have to work at being available
Sure.
for what God wants to do. And quit trying to get ahead of the story, and quit trying to make it happen on our own, and just be available and surrender. And when we get in some of this, it's going to get messy.
Yeah.
We really get
Sure.
involved in working with people out there who are broken. We were talking about the sermon about how we're all broken and everything. And an event happened at the duplex that we own, and cops had to be called and all this. And for them, that's normal.
Yeah.
That's their normal life.
Mm-hmm.
They're broken.
Sure.
And I can get all righteous and think, I'm gonna kick him out, and all this kind of stuff, but they're broken, and our world's broken.
Absolutely.
And there's a whole lot of people who love it, don't go to church anywhere.
Yeah.
We kind of think that we're such a religious town that there's all these people going to church all the time, but there's a whole bunch that don't. A whole bunch, and they're just broken, and to get involved with broken people, it's gonna get messy.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna get uncomfortable,
Yeah.
it's gonna get inconvenient. And so I think we just have to work at being surrendered,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because how you gonna take that guy along with you?
Right.
When
Yeah,
you're
so,
not surrender, you don't even like it. You judge it,
Yeah.
you're not willing to get in there.
Right. And I think sometimes too, we want them just to be like something said that I pray about that and I thought of that. Like we want people to be open and excited, and that's true. But what about the guy who, like you're saying,
Yeah.
where you just got to be in there and love them,
Right.
and then maybe they'll be open later.
And we don't know how long that will take.
Yeah. Mhm.
How long does it take to just
Right.
love on people and encourage them and be there for them and work with them? You mentioned someone you were studying with. She didn't have to change overnight.
Right.
It took her a long time to get where she's at.
Oh yeah.
And we can't, I guess, some guy was talking, doing an evangelistic message, and he said, we're all looking for that guy who's one lesson away.
It's true.
We're meeting, and he's one lesson away. We're gonna sit down, open our Bibles, and here's Ward.
Yeah.
Ward convinced me.
Yeah.
Hey, that'd be great.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah.
But we're not ready to have to love upon people for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. 9 years.
God spent all this time with Abraham trying to become the father of faith.
Yeah.
How much time do we have to spend with people to?
Yeah.
We want to meet the people with the seed on the good soil instead of the thorns
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't
or
have-
the
Ooh,
path.
that's a
We
good
don't
one.
have, we don't have any weeds.
Uh-huh.
Farming. I just want it to grow.
I think two major times in Abraham's life, God went the same way with the apostles, what Jesus did this time. Are you all in?
Yeah.
And are you all in? Are you willing to give it all up to be in, to me? It's like, you're gonna get cut, and then are you gonna kill your kid? Are you willing to give it all up? Are you all in?
Yeah.
And the same thing with what Jesus constantly told his apostles, are you guys all in? Because, yeah, this is gonna be awesome and great, but you're also gonna suffer and die.
Mm-hmm.
And to think about, what great news is that if I'm just gonna go get killed for, to think about, if I was with the apostles, Jesus later said, are you gonna be all in? Because it's gonna be tough,
Yeah.
but it's gonna be beautiful. You're gonna go to a cross, but it's gonna be awesome. Am I all in? And, but I think that's the same thing he kept asking Abraham, are you all in?
Yeah.
The chiasm in this ends up, the center point is circumcision.
Yeah.
Are you all in?
And
Yeah.
that's, I remember studying this at Sunset, and the teacher there was talking about how this is a symbol, it's a mark that you can never forget.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do that doesn't remind you who you belong to. You know, from the simplest thing, you know, going to the bathroom, to the most intimate thing, making love, you're reminded whose you are. And that's always been significant, that here God gave this sign, like the rainbow in the sky. Now he's given this sign, a symbol. It's not on the sky anymore, now it's on the man. But it reminds them whose they are.
Yeah.
And they can never get away from that. You can't take it back either.
Yeah.
It's a man's field.
Well, it's strange to think about, you know, that is the standard custom for all the hospitals. They ask you, you know, do you want your child circumcised, you know, when they're here, and they say it's for cleanliness. No, really, it's for religious tradition.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're not even Jews.
Right, we're not into the medical side of it. There's no reason.
No, absolutely isn't.
And in fact, there is research.
The body was designed to
you
be
do-
that way. God wanted it to be different. For us to stand
You're
out.
traumatizing this child, and it's not necessary. It was only necessary as a mark of the covenant for them to see. Now, we've accepted that and kind of became our Judeo-Christian habit or whatever, but I think it's going away. You look at years, kids born in the 50s versus kids born in the 2000s. It's going away, but I think the significant part was that you can never get away from whose you are. And sometimes I wish we had some kind of mark that reminded us when we looked in the mirror whose you were.
Yeah.
You know?
You can make one.
I don't have my cross on, but you know, a lot of times I wear a cross just because it reminds me who I belong to. And,
Going on your finger.
True, I'm always wearing one. Reminding me whose I am.
I thought it was this one she's talking about.
No,
Look at that one
you
too.
got two.
That's who you are.
That's also whose I am.
You know, I'm thinking about all these guys, you know, here you are, you're Jewish. Do they walk around and everybody just kind of like, you know, in PE class or you're in football, you got 80 guys in the shower, you go, hey, you're Jewish. I'm Jewish too. You know, it's like how, you know, it's not like a market. You just walk around with everything hanging out. It's like, hey, I'm a Jew.
Showing everybody.
But you can't get away from that.
No,
It's
it's
yours.
permanent.
It's yours.
So I like how they end the discussion of this podcast with what we kind of brought up earlier is kind of what's expected of us now. That we're 2,000 years this side of Jesus, 2,000 years of the Holy Spirit, however many thousand years this side of Abraham. How much more should we understand because we have all of this? You know, we
Which
still,
is kind of sad.
yeah. That was my thought.
Where we should be and where we are, way too
Yeah,
much
so
things.
true. It says Abraham when he's 99. It's just
Here we
like-
have the Bible. I mean, we have this app that has a whole library of commentaries, dictionaries, concordances, Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and the entire Bible, you know, Genesis to Revelations, and no one opens it up.
Mhm.
No one reads it.
They would be appalled, I'm sure. Right? Or maybe not.
Just the fact that we have access
Yeah.
to the
Mhm.
Bible. No other generation has had access to the Bible like we have.
No way we did.
No. We've had the Dead Sea Scrolls. We've actually gone and seen them, the Isaiah parchments, you know.
I've even smuggled them into parts of the world where if you had one, it meant life in prison. And here we take it for granted. You know, it's amazing.
Well, look at the apostles. Their Bible gateway was here. They had to memorize all of that. They had to memorize the Old Testament. They had to correlate what Jesus was saying to the Old Testament scriptures so that it get a context to what they were saying now, and do it all up here.
I'm still working on Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9.
Yeah. Still don't have that.
And I have a horrible memory. You know, I was not blessed with a good memory in any way. Now, I can memorize scriptures, but I can't ever memorize
Where it's at.
where it's at. The numbers and the books, they get all jumbled. That's part of this dyslexia. But that's the way God made me. That's okay. I'm thankful that I do have what I have, and I'm able to go look at it now. Because if I was a young Jewish boy, I don't think I would have made it through the 5th grade. You're like, here, go catch fish. That's your new life. Because
But the good thing is,
Never gonna be a
those were the guys Jesus chose.
exactly. It's like we
There's
dropped
no
out
learning
in
to
5th
do,
grade,
really.
and we had to become fishermen because we did not memorize our text. We kept checking out the girls and got ourselves in trouble.
And Jesus chose these guys to be part of the master's program.
I like how they end up with God walks with us, and He meets us where we are in our life, and then calls us forward. And then, so it's our job to take the next step.
Yeah.
And then, so the last 2 questions is, what are we learning in our walk of faith, and where is God calling us to? I think we've already kind of touched on that through our whole discussion. Is we have goals, we have thoughts about what we think God wants us to do. We just need to take that step.
As soon as we think that balancing His grace, work, and all that, God accepts us where we are, but He refuses to allow us to stay there. And so you can't just sit back and go, thank you for the salvation, just give me that free ride in. He goes, no.
Yeah.
I accept you the way you are, but you can't stay here.
I think for me, it started making me ask hard questions with myself. Like, you know, when I'm driving the errand tonight, I was thinking about studying the Bible. Do I really want to study the Bible with me? Because it's going to require effort. And on my part to make that happen. And where, you know, other spiritual hard questions, you know, it's like, how do I really feel about that? And where's my motivation coming from? Or, you know, I really started, this podcast has really made me start asking hard, serious questions about my own character, my personality, about how I think about things, and really question my motives behind it, and what can I do to change those things? You know, how God, you know, help me to see the way to change my heart, and help me to be teachable, and to have a soft heart, so you can mold that clay any way you want. But yeah, it's just made me ask the hard questions.
As we wrap it up, I keep thinking we are studying with people.
Yeah, exactly.
We're studying with people now. We are studying the Bible, it's taking effort. And there's people out there watching it. So glad you guys got to join us. Next week we'll be on discussion 11, or episode 11. I don't know what the name of it is off the top of my head. But join us next week.
Don't forget to like and share.
Cue the music.
Cue the music.